Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Two Crime Besties. I'm Emma.
And I'm Meg. Welcome, everyone.
How have you been, Meg? How's your week been?
Oh, my gosh. Mental week. And I know you feel it too.
Yep.
Feeling really exhausted at the moment. I know our kids just do so many sports. And so midweek and then weekends, it's just sports. I feel like a break is needed.
It is.
How about you?
I feel exactly the same way. We're recording this on a Saturday night because we're, rages like that.
It totally has different vibes though, doesn't it?
It really does. I'm not hating it, I have to say.
Oh, especially when the Prosecco comes out first.
But this was the only time that we could find in the weekend to record because the weekends are just insane. We were just chatting before we started recording about, the mental load of motherhood, and in particular the mental load of the group chat situation for all of the various sporting teams our children are part of.
It's so hard to keep track of them all. Like, I mean, we both have 2 boys each, and then they both play 2 sports each. So then it's which group chat am I in, and who's like, I'll find people commenting in group chats, and I'm like, huh? You're in the wrong team, love.
Yeah. Hold on, where am I? Which one is it? Which
Me.
sport?
Yeah, which sport for
Hi.
Oh, God.
I know exactly what you're saying. And then keeping up with what everyone has to say and all of the kids who are sick. Today, what my eldest son had basketball and his coach rocked up and said, "Oh, we've got no subs today." And I was like, "Oh God, obviously missed checking that on the group chat." But, 3 kids were away. So,
oh, wow. I mean, well, so that's the thing. I mean, that's what half the group chat's about. My kid's sick, can't make it to this,
And then you get the 27,000 messages about,
okay.
I mean, which is lovely. It's nice that people care, but also let's just mute that for a few minutes. And
the multiple different platforms. I mean, I think I've got 3 different platforms going at them for 4 different sports, 4 different things.
Yeah.
And it's just like, how do I keep track of where I'm supposed to comment what?
Yeah. It's impossible.
Absolutely.
It's impossible. Anyway, that's all right. It means the weeks go very, very quickly. And we're already up to our 4th episode. So that's a bit exciting.
Easy, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
And I think we're hoping we're getting better as we go along.
Throwing things in. Yeah.
We're trying different formats and different ways to go about it. So please stick with us if this is your first time listening to us. We would absolutely love it if you could subscribe to our podcast, because it means that more people will find us and we can keep doing this and having lots of fun with it. And I promise every week we feel like we get better and a little bit more confident and we learn something new, and it's something that we can, build on as time goes on. But for episode number 4, I think we're doing all right.
We're doing good. No, I love it. And I'm so enjoying doing this, and the research I'm finding actually getting like easier in a sense of knowing what I need to go about doing, but also like I'm getting more in depth and finding new ways of finding information out about things.
Same. I know for this, I think, so today we're actually talking about OJ Simpson and Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. And I mean, this case, there was so much to go into. And I think we were discussing this before as well. You could have taken so many different pathways with it, and we could probably do an episode if we went and explored all of those different pathways. We probably could have an episode that goes for hours and hours on end.
The amount of podcasts I did list, whether I listened to them or whether when I was just searching, that it was as soon as it was the OJ Simpson one, it was a part 1, part 2 situation. There were so many people who have obviously tackled this topic very thoroughly and have had to go into multiple episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go on so long with this because there are so many elements to this case.
So many. And even I feel like I've watched a lot, listened to a lot of podcasts and watched documentaries and watched the dramatizations and everything that's out there about this over the years, not just necessarily in the lead up to this. And I still found out things when I was researching for this that I thought, oh, I had no idea. I didn't know that bit or that little tidbit of information. So hopefully we can shed a little bit of, give people a little bit more information, or maybe have that little glimpse into something they didn't already know about the case. But also just, I mean, the discussion of this alone, I think it's going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see where you've come at this, and then I've obviously, I think we've maybe come at it from different angles.
Yeah.
And then just to find out the different information you found to what I found. And
Yeah.
I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, agreed. I think we don't ever talk about what we're going to research before we start, or try not to. I mean, we can't help ourselves sometimes. Sometimes we'll have a little chat about something. Like, damn, we should have recorded that because it's really good.
Talking, we need to wait for this.
That actually reminds me, my husband and his best friend, if they're ever going camping or, you know, going to meet up with each other, they do like a week beforehand, they won't communicate with one another so that they've got like, you know, enough to talk about when they actually
boy thing.
Isn't it?
God.
Isn't it? So they call it a communication blackout.
Can you imagine if we had a communication blackout?
We just couldn't do that. Yeah, we couldn't do that.
Sorry, not going to happen.
No. Oh, so much could happen, and then we wouldn't know. And then how would we'd never catch up. We would never catch up.
No, we'd never catch up on the catch up.
No,
like,
that's right.
Yeah. No, that's not allowed. God, that's bad enough when you go away on holidays and we still, you know, we only communicate less.
I know.
Like
I know. Yep. Anyway, should we get into it?
Let's get into it. You get started because I think you've got more of the beginnings.
I do.
I think more of the other.
Yeah,
things.
I think so. So I sort of took more of a tact of the lead up to the murder, and then obviously I looked into the stuff that happened afterwards as well. But I was really interested in like what OJ Simpson's life and what Nicole Brown Simpson's life was like before they got together and how they got together, because I'm like, where did this all start? And at what point in their relationship did things start to turn south? Yeah. So
I guess, do we start though by saying, like, basically, obviously, OJ Simpson was acquitted in this. So he has not been convicted of this murder.
No, he hasn't.
But we're associating him with this murder.
Oh, absolutely. Like in my mind, and
within many people's minds.
I think most reasonable.
Including Robert Kardashian.
Yes. Oh, the Kardashian name only took, 3 minutes to come into this?
It should always.
Yes, he was acquitted, but I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that I think he did it. So I think a lot of what I researched and discussed probably leans more towards that theory and the fact that he's done it. To me, there is absolutely no way he couldn't have done it. There's too much evidence to go down the path of him having done it. But anyway, so when I was looking up Nicole Brown Simpson, and I think it's probably also worth mentioning, and I feel like a lot of the documentaries and podcasts that I listened to, aside from one, didn't actually really mention Ron Goldman a lot. And so I've looked a little bit into his background as well. There is a really wonderful podcast, and we'll link it in the show notes below, about that was made by Ron Goldman's sister. And it's a long-form podcast, so there are several episodes. I can't remember how many there were off the top of my head, but it really goes into a lot of depth, and it really gives his details on his life and the perspective of his family and what was really left behind for them in the wake of his murder. So that's definitely worth a listen. Yeah. So I'll start with Nicole. She was an absolutely stunning young woman. She was born on the 19th of May in 1959 in Germany. She was the second daughter to her parents, and they moved over to America not long after she was born. I'm not quite sure why they moved over. And then she actually had 2 other siblings born in the US after her family moved there. She was, I guess, the quintessential girl next door. She was a very attractive young woman. She was the homecoming queen of her high school. So she was very, very popular. When she was 18, she was doing some modeling, and she worked as a waitress at a spot called, like, a celebrity sort of hangout and bar club kind of thing called the Daisy, and that's where she met OJ Simpson. It was on her very first shift working there that she met him. So that alone blows my mind. Just this turn of fate. He was there. She was there on her first shift. She was probably feeling fairly vulnerable. She was only, I think she was 18 or 19 years, 18 was she?
When she met
him. And that he was actually married at the time to another woman named Marguerite, and they had 2 children. And OJ and Nicole ended up moving in together a few months after meeting, so it was very, very quick. Simpson apparently required her to be with him all the time, so she put off going to college, and she ended up, I think, even quitting her job, and she just sort of had to be with him, and she sort of, I guess, fell into that life.
It started the financial abuse, I guess, of part of their lives, didn't it?
And isolating her.
He isolated her, that she had no future prospects in terms of a career with, going to college or something, but also then no work, so therefore no income either.
And also, like, that would really cut her social life, or being able to expand her social circle, like going to college or going to university. I know you meet friends, and that's a really social time of your life. But
that were your own age.
Yes. But, you don't, she never had that.
Mm-hmm.
And she ended up just really befriending the wives and girlfriends of OJ's teammates and his established friendships. The fact that he has actually said he required her to be with him, they're his words, I find that incredibly chilling.
Mm-hmm.
And so the controlling nature of the relationship started really, really early on. And that's a theme that you'll see throughout the story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably something she didn't identify at the start. Do you think, like, she probably felt so loved, like he wanted her to be with him all the time?
She would have seen it entirely of someone being, that he loves me that much that he wants me to have this lifestyle of, not having to work, and she'd be able to flip that around in her brain to make it sound like so romantic and so special, especially at that young age, 18, 19.
And not having really had much experience, with relationships before that, or any significant relationship.
Or that celebrity lifestyle either.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was well established by that stage in terms of his career and where he was at.
He was towards the end of his footballing career at that time.
Yeah. So he was more into, having people over the house and having parties and gatherings of people, and there would have been some incredible names being, brought in through the house that she would have been, part of the entertaining of that, and being like the partner of OJ Simpson. That would have brought all those sorts of things with it.
I did see one of her friends interviewed, and her friend said that her friend was a wife of a former teammate, but she said that she just fell into the role, like she took on the role of housewife essentially right from the get-go. So she moved into OJ's home called Rockingham, and which, I mean, I've seen some photos of the place. It looked incredible, like an absolute mansion. It had a basketball court, indoor pool, outdoor, like it was just
multiple guest houses,
many guest houses, which that comes into play a little bit later on. A mansion beyond what we would even consider to be a mansion, probably.
Yeah.
So they got engaged in 1983 and married in Feb of 1985 at home. They got married at Rockingham. And then shortly after, their daughter Sydney was born in October of 1985, and their son Justin was born in August of 1988. So I guess, it's that sort of sets the scene of, how their relationship got to at that point. But OJ's a very interesting story too.
Yeah.
So he has 2 older siblings and 1 younger sibling, and his father left when they were all quite young. His mum was a nurse, and she raised the kids on her own. So she was working full time. I think she did lots and lots of, she was just a really community-minded woman and did a lot to help out at the kids' school when she could, but she really raised the 4 children on her own. I found out a really interesting, now this is something that I only heard fleetingly in a documentary I was watching, but they very fleetingly said that OJ Simpson's father was in a homosexual relationship towards the end of his life.
Yes.
Now, I haven't been able to find any other evidence or anything else supporting that, but this was in a fairly again, we'll list it in the show notes, but a fairly credible documentary, long form documentary I watched, and it also came out later that OJ was incredibly homophobic. Like there was an incident once where Nicole was sitting next to a gay man while holding their little boy, and OJ absolutely lost his shit and made her get away from him because he didn't like the fact that she was sitting next to a gay bloke with their son.
Well, that's just unbelievable.
Isn't it? It's just absolutely gross.
Yeah.
So OJ was always very sporting growing up, and he absolutely excelled, especially at football. He went to a junior college, which I'm not really sure the difference between a junior college and a regular college.
Not okay with the American system in that way.
Nor am I. But anyway, he went to a junior college, but then was picked by USC, who's one of the larger colleges in the States. They picked him up, and he basically transformed their team, and they won all these championships, and he was just an absolute star, and it seems like he really sort of carried the team forward to...
I believe to this day he's considered to be like something like the best running back that has ever played the game.
Okay, so yes, he would, until probably his death, he would tell you that.
Yeah, right.
He's actually like 21st now, something like that. Like, yes. Yeah. So, and I think they measure it by how many yards they ran in their career or something. Right. And say, again, I didn't write this down, so I don't know exactly, but say he ran like 8,000 yards over his career or something. Yeah. And then I think the person who's at the top of that list now is like at 21,000 yards or something.
I've no idea what a running back does.
I think he runs. So I know he doesn't necessarily catch the ball because apparently in his first season playing for the Buffalo Bills, the coach there decided not to put him as the running one, decided to put him as a catcher or receiver,
right?
He couldn't catch the ball.
Oh, okay, right.
And so he had a really terrible season that season, and then I don't know what changed, but they decided to make him run again. Yeah. They decided to make him run again, and then that's where he sort of started to excel and became, really, really...
I know there's a guy that plays, it's called Travis Kelce.
Well, who doesn't know Travis Kelce? I mean, swoon.
Oh, sorry.
So he played for the Buffalo Bills, and then he played for the 49ers. He was nicknamed the Juice. Now, I have to tell this story. So I've always, even as a kid, I've always known like his nickname was the Juice because of OJ, orange juice. I was listening to the True Crime and Cocktails podcast about this.
Yeah.
And Christy, who's like our favorite person in the whole wide world.
I love them so much.
Loved her. She was talking about this and she's like, I just had no idea. She goes, I just didn't really give it much thought why he called it the Juice. And she was talking to her 10-year-old son and he's like, oh yeah, the Juice, OJ, that makes sense. And she was like, oh my God. Seriously?
It takes a 10-year-old sometimes to put those things together.
That's so true. That is so true.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I feel like our brains are filled with things that we can't process because we've got so much else going on. Sometimes you need a 10-year-old brain who's got capacity to think about things.
10-year-old boy brains sometimes too, because I just find that their way of like even nicknaming each other in general is just in a different wavelength. That I don't think like that. Your name's Orothol James. It's not OJ. Like it's like, that's just something that evolves over time. And then the Juice to go with that. I mean, I just go, where do they even jump to these things half the time? Seems to make sense, but it's
Yeah. Did you find it really creepy? Did you watch the People versus OJ Simpson, the dramatization, the docuseries about this?
A while ago, not recently.
Yes, same. It really creeped me out. So David Schwimmer played Robert Kardashian in that in that series. And it really creeped me out how he kept calling OJ Juice. I don't know why. It just really,
like a little puppy dog running after him.
Maybe that's what it was. It was just pathetic.
Robert Kardashian was the water boy at the university he went to and stuff. So that's how they knew each other. Yeah. So I think he's just been his little puppy dog.
Lucky for forever. Well, it's just it really. I'm like, not into it. So if I ever met OJ, which obviously now we're not going, we never will.
No,
thank goodness. But there's no way I'd call him the Juice.
Oh no.
He was in college and sort of the early part of his football career, there was sort of the Black rights movement was really, really strong in the US. And he was interviewed for several documentaries. And because he was so well known as a Black man, really living in a predominantly white man's world at the time, he was interviewed a lot about the movement. And there's a really famous quote. I think you know what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
He said, "I'm not Black, I'm OJ."
Yeah. I think that says a lot about who he is as a person.
Yeah. Agreed. And he surrounded himself with white men.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
White problematic men. Again, we'll probably get to that. So his first wife, Marguerite, he married in 1967. And they had a daughter, a son, and a daughter. Sorry, I think before I said they had 2 children, they actually had 3. And in 1979, their youngest daughter, Erin, died of respiratory failure after falling into the family pool. She was not even 2. I think she was days off her second birthday.
Yeah, it's tragic.
It's so tragic. But that happened pretty much at the time he met Nicole. So she...
Oh, seriously? I hadn't put those 2 together.
Yep. So she basically came into the picture at that time.
Oh, right. I didn't actually work that one out. Right.
Yeah. And he... So it's widely known he cheated on his wife well before he met Nicole, and it's also well known that he did the same thing to Nicole once their relationship was established, or probably the whole time along. But I just thought that was an interesting timing for him to then sort of...
I mean, trying to go through that as a family is tragic, and, relationships often break down due to, tragic events like that. But to then be going off and looking for someone else sexually, it just seems so rank.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, how could that be the thing that you're thinking of in that situation? Yeah, I don't get it. When OJ started cheating on Nicole, I mean, I'm sure this happened well before she was pregnant, but he has actually been recorded as saying this, that he had an affair while she was pregnant because she gained so much weight.
I think he actually would say it to her directly. Yeah. So I mean, just horrendous.
He was carrying his child, sorry.
Yeah. But that's, how dare you put on weight?
Yeah. And I guess the physical abuse started early on in their relationship as well. There's no real sort of timeline for this, as in we don't really know when it started, or we know when the reports, I guess, started coming through, but they were always accidents. Like, she'd present to emergency departments. One time she said she was in a bike accident. She fell off her bike and she actually had a possible skull fracture at the time.
Jesus.
We now know that wasn't a bike accident. He was incredibly controlling. He used to tell her what to wear, how to cut her hair, how to wear her hair. He followed her everywhere she went or had her followed. So it wasn't always, even when they were together, but it happened then more so afterwards as well, after they'd split up, like he had any right to be doing that at any time.
No.
He would either have friends of his follow her, or he would basically get one of Nicole's friends to kind of turn on her and report back to him on what they'd been doing. the controlling nature of the relationship started right from the get-go. I don't know if you found anything about his first wife and whether she had any of these experiences.
It's not well documented. I read a few things and heard a couple of podcasts that he was abusive in that relationship, but to what extent it sort of, went into much detail.
Okay.
But she was an alcoholic.
Yeah, I believe so.
I believe that sort of, and then so the end of their relationship was, and he was obviously cheating on her, which again, I still put that into a form of abuse, really, into that mental abuse and emotional abuse. So it sounds as though his patterns were definitely there. There's even girlfriends who have commented about his abusive behaviours. So it doesn't sound like this was something he totally only targeted Nicole for.
No, it's a pattern of behaviour.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of their biggest sort of physical altercations was the New Year's Eve 1988, 1989, the changeover of that year. And the police were called to that.
The 911 call for that is horrific.
It's horrible. It's chilling.
Yeah.
Go and listen to it if you haven't already.
I mean, that alone is enough evidence of his ability to escalate his anger.
Yeah.
You're hearing him in the background. She was in absolute fear of her life that night.
Her voice is trembling on that call. Like, she is absolutely afraid for her life.
Yes. And the fact that she says, the cops have been there 8 times previous.
Yep.
And have never done anything, because he used to have the cops over to his house for dinners and parties. Yep. Like, he had them all in his back pocket. He befriended them, and he knew what he was doing. And whether they turned a blind eye, I mean, I'm sure they did, but it seemed that the ramifications for his actions were not akin to anyone else. Like, he got away with so much in the lead up, and had they intervened, would the outcome have potentially been different? Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. We don't know. I saw him interviewed, like, it was on a sports show, well and truly after Nicole and Ron's death, and the interviewer actually asked him about this incident, and he said, "Yeah, it got a little bit loud, but we were both guilty." Yeah, he even, like, that 1989 one, he absolutely claimed that she was the one who attacked him.
No, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the New Year's Eve.
Yeah. He claims it was her, not him. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. You didn't have a scratch on you, yet she looked like she'd been in a full-blown punch-up.
The cop that he'd befriended, he rang him to try and get ahead of it, because this is the other thing. When the cops came, she said, "You've got to do something. Like, you've got to arrest him."
Yeah.
Talking clearly has done nothing in the 7 or 8 times they've been out before.
Yeah.
And so this particular LAPD officer was like, "Okay, well, we're going to arrest you." Yeah. And he's like, "Oh, can I just quickly go upstairs and grab some stuff?" And they said yes. And he fled. He got in his car and drove away, and they never caught him. And the cop who he was friends with, the following morning, Nicole went into the police station and asked to speak with him.
Yeah.
And he said to her, he basically at this point believed OJ, because OJ had called him to say, "I don't know what to do, but this is what happened, and I didn't do anything, and she attacked me, and she was drunk, and she was this." And then Nicole went into the police station and showed him the photos from the night before, and that changed his mind, because he said, "I've never laid a hand on her."
Clearly he's laid a hand on her. Like,
the photos, like that photo of her, the side of her face, and it's just taken, I think, out the front of her house.
Yeah, it's not, it's not by anyone particularly taking, because bruises and things don't show up well in photos. You've got to take it in certain lighting to be able to get the angle in that right, of, like, to get the bruising that shows.
Yeah.
But this was blatant. It was so blatant. The simple fact of the matter is, the man was well over 6 foot.
Yep.
15 stone or something. She was 5'5".
Yep.
And about 8 stone.
Light.
Like, she was tiny, as if she would be able to beat him up. And I mean, it just blows my mind that he could even think that.
And to listen to that 911 call, there is absolutely no doubt she was terrified. She was being perpetrated against.
Yes.
She wasn't the perpetrator.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
And in one of the 911 calls, you can hear her screaming, "He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me."
Yeah. She's not wrong.
She wasn't wrong.
No. And it's so tragic that she was predicting it, really. I mean, even up until I think it was actually the day prior to the murder, she had gone to a women's shelter because she knew she was being stalked, and she asked for help and they didn't give it to her, which is just so, I mean, I hope that in some ways we've learned things over these years and that today that would be different, that, these things can be perpetrated against women in all walks of life, that you don't have to walk a certain way, talk a certain way, look a certain way to be someone who can be in an abusive relationship.
That's it. And she, just because they're rich and he's famous doesn't mean that
just because he can run and not catch a ball, it doesn't mean that he's a good bloke.
Yeah, that's
just,
it.
He's a good guy. He's trying hard.
No, he's just been lucky enough to be born good at a particular sport.
Yeah.
That's it. When the police turned up, he actually said to them, "I actually don't want her in my bed anymore." And he said, "Oh, I don't want to have sex with her. I've got 2 other women anyway."
Oh, that's so repulsive.
Yeah.
He's so gross.
He's so gross. So he's trying to be like, "Well, no, I didn't do that because I actually don't even want her. Like, gross. I've got 2 other women. I don't need her." And yet he's following her to gas stations. He's, turning up where she is all the time. At this point, I think when he murdered her, he had a girlfriend, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So what the fuck? Like, go and be in your new relationship. I mean, God, that poor girlfriend, not knowing probably what she was getting herself into.
Well, to be honest, on the day of the murder, so when they talk about the day of the murder, he really had copped 2 lots of rejection that day, which I honestly think is the biggest motive here. Because at the end of the day, I ultimately just believe that this is a domestic violence. It is 100% just domestic violence. Well, I shouldn't say just. That is what this murder was.
Yes.
But so what had happened throughout the day was Nicole had made a choice that she did not want him in her life anymore. Yes, they had children together and she was going to have to put up with him in a way, but she had made it very clear to him that she wasn't going to be around him and that she didn't want, and that she'd also gone to this woman's shelter around the stalking. She was calling him out. She had had enough and she was out. His girlfriend, Paula, at the time, had left a very lengthy voicemail message on his phone ending the relationship.
I'd completely forgotten about that.
Mind you, I believe they got back together.
I think they did because I've seen photos of her, his trial, I think.
But no, so that day she did break up with him, Paula. She left a very lengthy message. And I mean, it wasn't just no, I don't want to see you anymore, bye. She had reasons as to why she wasn't going to see him again.
So was he
unleashed on?
Was he being physically abusive towards her and controlling towards her as well?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
And then a lot of the message, apparently, and I haven't heard it because you can't find it really, but I did hunt. But a lot of the message was things like, "You're clearly obsessed," and that's a very important word being used. "You're obsessed with Nicole," and that's what she'd had enough of.
Yeah, because I mean, imagine being in a relationship with someone who's then obsessed and preoccupied with going and following her places and worried about who she's seeing. And I mean, Nicole was in a relationship with the owner of the restaurant Mezzaluna, which is where Ron Goldman worked. And he has been interviewed a few times. Seems like a really lovely man, very good looking. And he was recounting an incident where they'd been at a club, some hot new club that they were invited to. They'd been there for about half an hour. Nicole comes back over to him. He was sitting down. She'd gone off for a dance or something. She came back to him and she's like, "Oh, we've got to go. OJ's here." And he was like, yep, let's go. They got out of there. They went home and in his words, got romantic back at Nicole's house.
Yep.
And they got romantic in a lounge room. And I saw some photos of the house, and it's sort of windows at the front and windows sort of down the side of the house where the main living area is. And apparently the main living area was kind of split into two smaller areas, and they were in like the smaller living space doing whatever they were doing. Well, actually now we know because OJ actually says it in in the testimony for, I actually don't know if it was in his trial or whether it was subsequent to that. But he's like saying about how she was sucking his dick. His words, not mine.
Very romantic.
Yeah, it's a romance. And how does OJ know that? Oh, because he was actually spying on them.
Right through the window.
Yeah.
What a
the next morning he goes around there, goes in through her back door, and he says, and so the boyfriend and Nicole were there, and he said she was holding my hand and she was trembling with him being there, with OJ being there.
Yeah.
And OJ's like, I need 3 minutes of her time. And Nicole's like, I'm going to have to give it to him because otherwise he's not going to go. Yeah. So they go off into another room. The boyfriend could hear everything, and he was basically like just ripping her a new one, ripping him a new one, just every kind of expletive under the sun. And then he walks into the kitchen where the boyfriend was standing, shakes his hand, he's like, no hard feelings, mate. Probably not mate, but no hard feelings, bud.
Yeah.
And out the door.
But I mean, their marriage was over. He had no right to be there, no right to have any opinion on who she's with or what she's doing. I mean, at this stage, I don't know how old she was when the marriage ended, but she would have been still quite a young woman.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I actually don't know how old she was either, but she would have been in her. Hold on, let's think. She would have been in her. She would have been late 20s.
28,
yeah,
30 sort of stuff is what I'm thinking in my head of how old she was.
Yeah, she would have been like 26.
Yeah, that young. Jeez. Yep. Like, it's just insane that she had so much of her life to live still. That's just insane.
Yeah.
So when they met, she was 18, but he was 30, which is just
gross.
And you can't tell me anything else. He groomed her.
For sure.
Oh, yuck.
For sure.
Gross.
And she had no idea.
No.
And of course she didn't. Of course she didn't. Yeah, so it's horrible. He, on the New Year's Eve incident, 1988, 1989 New Year's Eve, he punched her in the face. She had cuts on her cheek and on her neck and nose, and he actually left a handprint on her neck. That's how hard he was like choking her essentially.
Yeah. I mean, she's lucky to have not been killed at one of those other incidents.
For sure. One of the LAPD officers who was interviewed for the documentary that I was watching, he pretty much said if any other domestic violence situation had a spousal battery report, which was this type of report that they had to fill out when they went to a domestic violence incident, it should have been filed as a felony, and that never happened.
Yeah. Because he's the juice. Jeez. Sorry. Oh, I just can't. He's just the most disgusting human.
He's revolting. He's absolutely revolting. Yeah. I still can't believe that he felt he had a right to look at her through her windows.
No.
And then comment on what he saw in her own private home. Oh, that was the other thing, because she would say when he came over to the house, like, be quiet, the children are around, like, don't wake them. She was so concerned with the safety of her children.
Yeah.
And he pretty much said to her, well, you didn't give a shit about the children when you were sucking that guy's cock in the lounge room. I'm like, different situation, mate.
Yeah.
Completely different situation.
Yep. So when he separated from Nicole, pre them getting married even, he got her to sign a prenup. So when she did leave him, she got nothing.
Yeah.
So they were living in very quite different financial situations, the two of them as well. So, I mean, her home that she was living in was quite modest in Brentwood in comparing it to what, I mean, probably still a very nice home. I'm not saying that she was living in the slums or anything like that, but it was he did not give her a cent of money.
No, he was paying for that house.
Yeah.
The rent on that house.
Yeah, she wasn't. He didn't give her any money when she left. And so yeah, I think he paid her rent as you said, but no actual money for her to live, kind of stuff. So she had to find her own way to do that, which I mean is just so unfair for his children to be able to say, you know, well, you're on your merry way kind of thing, and you know, he stopped her from being able to have a career, make her own money. And then made her sign this prenup at such a young age, not understanding what she was signing, to then have, you know, had children with this man. She's lost all those things, and then to walk away and have nothing. Yeah. You know, it's just disgusting.
Oh, it's horrible. And it's just another part of that control and manipulation right from the get-go. I think Nicole was looking, I mean, you know, she was doing everything she could to try and make a life for herself after this. She was looking to do a photography or become a photographer, I think. Right. Yeah. So she had prospects there, and she had something she was interested in. I also heard somewhere or read somewhere that she was interested in interior design, and she had quite an eye for that. And that was maybe something else she might have potentially pursued. Yeah. So I guess, do you reckon that now brings us to the night of the murder?
Oh God, what a horrendous night.
Yeah.
So they'd all gone to their daughter's recital. And OJ was there, as well as Nicole and all of her family, her mum, her sister, everyone was all there. They were leaving the recital and going out for dinner. Now, they were supposed to be going to a restaurant where OJ's son was actually the sous chef at. But at the last minute, there was a change of plans, and they ended up at Mezzaluna. Mezzaluna. Yeah. Which, as you say, so she was seeing the owner, which, I mean, I think in, you know, when this all took place, I always had it in my head, there was kind of this inference in the media, I think, that she was seeing Ron Goldman and that he was the boyfriend, you know, and things that, you know, and then somebody rocked up, potentially OJ, you know, and seeing that this was her boyfriend and that had happened. But it wasn't that at all.
I believe the relationship between Nicole and Ron, they did have a friendship.
They were friends, yeah.
They'd been out for coffee and like, I think they were very friendly, but Ron was also younger than Nicole.
Yeah.
He was single and having a really great time living in LA and sort of forging his own way.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was absolutely no evidence or no suggestion that there was anything romantic between the two of them.
No. And the only reason he was there on the night then was because when they left the restaurant, Nicole's mum had actually left her glasses behind. So she rang back to the restaurant and said, my mum's left her glasses. Can you find them? They found them. They put them into an envelope and put them at the desk and said, they'll be here for you in the morning. But Ron, being a lovely bloke, when I've got to go past that way on my way home, I'll take them with me and drop them off to Nicole. Wrong place, wrong time. It was just horrendous.
Purely just a turn of fate. As you said, they were meant to go to a different restaurant that night, so the mum wouldn't have left the glasses there.
Yeah.
That night, as you said, like obviously things were escalating with OJ and Nicole, or between OJ and Nicole, and he just happened to, like, being a good Samaritan, really ended his life.
Yeah.
It was just horrible, victim of circumstance.
Absolutely.
So what transpired, I guess, as the night went on, and I think they stopped for ice cream on the way home.
Yep.
And the kids, you know, they got home, kids have gone off to bed. And I think it was about 9:30 or something that Ron dropped the glasses off. Does that 9:30, 10?
Yeah. Yeah, must have been.
The glasses off. And I think the suggestion is that Ron actually interrupted or got there just at exactly the wrong time, and that OJ had actually already murdered.
Yeah, well, the evidence sort of shows that Nicole must have been laying down already when he arrived, because there was the blood in the scene.
Yeah.
Nicole did not have any blood on the bottom of her feet. So therefore she had to have been the first victim and fallen over before there was blood, whereas Ron had blood on the bottom of his feet.
Right. So he walked across
into the scene. So there's evidence to sort of suggest that whether or not Nicole was dead yet or not, I'm not sure, but she certainly had been, attacked enough to have been on the ground. And Ron has entered and potentially wanted to protect and help, but that was the sort of person he was from all accounts. He also was a black belt in karate.
Yep.
And so he was actually very, very good at that. So people were quite surprised that he wasn't able to protect himself. But having said that, in the scenario, and when you see the footage of where this took place, the small space that they were in.
It's a small walkway.
He was really kind of trapped within there.
Yeah, he had no way to really get out.
No. So I think, and from what the autopsies show, he fought very hard. And he certainly
had a lot of defensive wounds, whereas Nicole didn't really.
She did have a fair few.
She had a few.
She did have a fair few. She certainly put up a good fight too, but was very easily, I think, overpowered.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's more what it was that, OJ was able to overpower her a little more, because I thought, like, in terms of defensive wounds, like, Ron had a lot. He really did put up a big fight, and Nicole, I guess she probably was incapacitated a lot quicker, or he was able to, as you say, overpower her.
Yeah. And it was very clear by the attack too that there was more anger by the killer put towards Nicole.
Well, the fury of the stabbing and the fact that he basically almost decapitated her.
The word to really describe it is what many people described it as overkill. There were more stab. Like, she probably would have passed away from the second, third sort of stab wounds were enough to do that, but the killer kept going, and then sliced her throat. And as you say, I think even I stupidly looked for some images, and I shouldn't have.
I did exactly the same thing.
You can see her spine through the wound.
Yep.
Like, it's.
And I believe her spine is actually severed too. Like, it's not intact. God. If you're going to look at it, it's really horrific. It's
mine was literally like, how do I get off it now?
It's horrific. And even the position of her body, like, it just, oh my God, it's horrible. Yeah. And there is so much blood.
I don't think
so much blood.
I was certainly not ready for it. But yeah,
I mean, you read about it and you say, yeah, there's lots of blood, and you think, okay, a human body has a lot of blood, a few liters of blood. To actually see that, probably most of it in her case especially, spilled out all over the stairs and along that pathway, it's horrific.
Horrific. Which, I mean, the way the bodies were found then was actually her dog.
Yeah.
Which, oh my God, like, dogs are the best. The dog had obviously witnessed this, ran and went down the street, and somebody found him and he had blood all over his feet, and they actually thought that he was injured. Like, I mean, as you would, you sort of think, what's going on here? The dog's injured, it's got blood on its feet. Yeah. But once they sort of found where the dog lived,
dog basically took them back, like made them go back to the house. Like, how incredible. I mean, animals,
find his owner.
These puppies are beautiful. So, and the people who came upon the scene, they were going for a walk at like 4 o'clock in the morning or something.
No, it wasn't quite that late. I think.
Wasn't it?
Oh, well, I think the dog had been found earlier, and they'd kept it in their yard for a while because they couldn't find.
That's right.
Well, the dog kept it kept actually getting to a street corner, planting its feet, not going any further.
That's right.
And they sort of say, like, potentially he was like worried. He was like, "You keep going, I'll stay here," because that wasn't. Yeah, that's not good. So then they took the dog home again, and then it just so happened that one of their neighbours was a vet or someone it was a dog sitter that they used to, who was someone was really good with dogs, and they said, "Can you see if you can help us out with this dog? We don't know who the owner is," and it ended up they then, I think at about 2 o'clock in the morning or something, wandered down the street with the dog, and the dog went straight to their house, and that was when they found the bodies. So
they called 911 obviously immediately.
Yeah. We're going to cut it there today because, as we said at the start of this episode, OJ is a massive case. And so we've decided we're going to split this episode in half because it is so long. We feel like this is a good point to pause at. And we're going to come back next week with the second half of this episode.
See you next week, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.